Welcome to Spring Every Day. So we have talked about a complete Spring Boot project, and we have talked about how to connect the UI to controller and connect the controller to service. So in this video, I would like to show you how to connect the service to JPA and then to the database. So we have a complete connection after this video. So we have a database, and we have to create a table for holding the data, and this is the table design. So we're going to have a post table, have a primary key, and have some fields, and then have a parent ID to reference back to see, hey, this is the comments of a post, or this is the comments of a topic, and the comments of comments. And if you look at the class diagram, they are similar to each other, they map to each other, except the comments in the database is using a foreign key and parent key relationship. Okay, so to create a table in the database, MySQL database, you can use a SQL statement to do that, create a table, and you can use the primary key and foreign key together, or you can create the table first and then you use this alt table SQL to create the foreign key. So once you have run this SQL against the database, you should be able to see a table like that. So table and have an ID, author, post date, body, and things like that. So now it's time to, so the database side is ready. Now it's time to have the Spring classes and Spring modules and the services and repositories to connect to the database. So we start with the model class, which is the post. So in this post class, so far is a very much like a Pojo class. It does not have anything to do with the database. So we'll add some of the annotation and make it connect to the database. Here's what we do, okay? So first we do a entity. So this entity will use the persistent, the JPA stuff. So this entity will mark this class as an entity in the database. And after that, we will associate that entity to a table. So a table, what is the table name? Let's see, name equal to, we have to come here to find out the table name. So the table name is called posts. Okay, good. And by doing this, you have connect this entity or Pojo class, model class, to the table. Now we have to make sure the fields has connect to the columns. So first is the ID, right? This is the primary key. So what we do is we give it an ID. So this is the primary key, this is the ID, and then we will let the database to decide how to generate this ID. So to make sure to let the database decide how to generate this ID, you would just need to see strategy. Okay, strategy equal to generation type, and we will use the identity. Okay, this identity will make sure this ID is controlled by the database. And now we need to tell the ID the column name. And what is the column name? So again, we come back to the database to find out, yes, this is ID. So ID is ID. Good. So now we have defined the a field in the Podro class to map it to the column of ID. And also we let the database to control the ID generation. Okay, now the author, let's see what we have. Author is author. So because the name is matching, you don't have to do anything. And post, okay, so post date is posted. So here we have to make a column to map that column name, and we call it a post date. Okay, and the body is called a body, and the parent's ID is parent's ID. Okay, parent. Okay, so parent ID is parent ID. That's fine, but we need to define a relationship, because parent to one parent has many comments. It's many to one. Okay, so many to one relationship is parent to the post. And now the comments, okay, this is a relationship like a comments belong to one parent, right? So it could be like you can define it as one to many, but we don't do it here because we want to use a different way to grab the comments once we have a parent comment, parent post. Okay, here is how you can do that. You define it as a transit. So once you define a transit, then the JPA would not automatically grab the comments for you. Instead, you have a control over the comments and you grab it yourself. Okay, so that's pretty much all that we should do to make the model class to map to the database. So we save it. So far we got the model class done. Now we need to create the repository. So repository is a concept in JPA, and it will automatically give you a chance, or a definition chance, so that you can specify what you want to do, and you want to let the JPA to implement a class for you. So any repository in JPA concept would be an interface. So now let's do it. We normally put it down under something like data. So okay, and this is the database. We wanted to make sure it's a data. So now we can give it to be, because we are talking about a post table, we can name it a post. You can name it anything. Repository. Okay, repository. Yeah, so that's the name we want. It's a post repository, but it's not a class. It's an interface. Okay, so this is the key part. So any repository is an interface. You don't have to write any implementation. It is the JPA to create the implementation according to whatever you define in the repository interface. So we want them to extend a interface which is provided by the Spring. It's a CRUD repository. This is the most used one. You have other you can use, but that need a lot more discussion. Okay, so for general purpose, you can always use CRUD repository. And this repository need to find out, or you need to define is what you want for the repository. So you want a post. So you want a post, that means whatever you query from this interface, you want to give it to build a post. And then what is the primary key is the ID, which is the integer, okay? And now you have a functional interface, okay? So for this interface to be able to be known to the Spring, you would just need to define it as a repository, okay? So once you define it as a repository, Spring would detect it and create a repository implementation for you, okay? So now what we need to do is, let's say we want this repository to find all the topics for us. Remember, all the topics is where the parents is now, right? There's no parents, then we call it a topic. Okay, so here is what you need to do. You would need to create a public method, okay? Public method, and you want to return a list of posts, okay? And you want to give it a name. You can give it any name. Find all topics. So find all topics, and that's all you want. That's the thing you want this interface to do for you. But how you want to do it, because they are not intelligent to see, I can understand what is topic, right? You have to tell them. So what you can tell them is use a query, okay? You give it a query, and the query has a definition, which is select. So it's quite much like SQL, but it is not SQL. So you would say post from post. So this post is the class name, and you select any P from the post class where, so P dot parent, okay, is null. Okay, so basically you tell the JPA or the Spring JPA to grab everything from the table when the parents is null, and that's pretty much it. You have created a method, and you have told the Spring to do the implementation for you. So now you have done the first method of the repository. So now what we can do is we can come to the service and to make use of it. Remember, we have created markup data right? So you can move the markup data right now into a kind of like a method. And you can move them into a method. So now you're not using markup anymore. What you can use right now is to define a repository in this service. Okay, so here's what we can do is we define the repository, and we auto-wire again, and we define it as a post repository. So this is the post repository we just created a while ago, and you can give it a name called post repository. So that should be fine. Any name should be should work, but we just define it, and we can now use it. And how do we use it? It's very simple. So we just need to call it, because it's an interface, so we can call it. But actually, is the Spring will create a class for you and find all topics. So once you have that, and you will be able to. So let's comment it. Okay. Okay. He doesn't like me to save that. We can delete it. Okay. And okay. Now we have got the service ready, and the last step is to make sure we are calling it, right? So we have done that. We have retrieved all topics, and which is the service to retrieve our topics and find our topics. So now we have connect all of them, and it's time to run a test. Okay. So come down to find the forum, and we start it. Let's see if we can get it started. Cool. So it's started, and now let's have the HTTP local, and we don't have anything. Okay, so for now it's no, we don't have any topics, but we can put a breakpoint and find out that is connected all the way. Okay, so let's put a breakpoint here, and let's put a breakpoint. You cannot breakpoint for interface. Okay, so we can put it here so that we know it comes from the controller. Okay, so let's refresh and start it again. Okay, now we can see it come to the controller and want to find all the topics. Now let's let it go. Now you can see it come down to the forum services and to find all the topics. And of course, right now we don't have anything in the database and in any post, so it comes down to see there is nothing. But however, we have connected. We have connected all the way from a user interface to controller to service and to JPA and to the database. And for the next step, we want to make sure we can create some data in the database, and we can get it queried out and show it up in the page. So far we have connected everything, and the next step we're going to show you some data. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.